Hey everybody, welcome today to our conversation kicking off the Ideas to Action series. With this first series in this iteration, we'll be talking about centering audiences for accountability and government reporting. We're so glad that y'all could make it here and join us for an hour this afternoon. Before we get into the meat of our conversation today, which is hearing from our wonderful selection of speakers, I will turn it over to my colleague, Amy Kovac-Ashley, to get us started. Amy?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Andrew. There we go. It's so nice to be with you all this afternoon. I hope that we can see, I'm not seeing everybody right now, but I will when I can have a bigger screen. But yes, we are super excited to have you here. Some of you may know a little bit about API. Those of you who don't, we just wanted to tell you a little bit about sort of what we do here. We really focus on trying to help news organizations be as sustainable as they can, and that's based in sort of an audience. Sorry, I don't know what the muting situation was going on. So we focus on an audience-centered approach in order to achieve sustainability, both for the news organizations themselves, but also for their communities. And that's where the focus here is really going to be on today. We're very excited about these three folks that you'll hear from. Next slide, please, Andrew. And it's really important to us that we are able to take the ideas that you all are going to be coming up with as a result of listening to these folks and actually put them into action. So that's where our sort of name comes from, the Ideas to Action series. And we're really trying to amplify and add to by this work and the work that comes after to the creative ideas and those strong models of ground up local reporting that's occurring in places around the country and that you're going to hear a lot about from today. We really want this work to help journalists learn about some of the models that already exist, actually find some new models as well with the work that you do, connect with other like-minded peers, and then apply that learning to things that you do in your own communities. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of the way this all works, and then you'll get to hear from our illustrious speakers. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Amy. So really just a little bit more specifically, when we think about what centering audiences in local government and accountability reporting means, we really think that for news organizations to thrive, this coverage of these local governance, local policy, local issues really needs to be built for and with the involvement of folks that are affected in these communities. And that's a pretty broad purview in terms of who is affected by various issues in communities. And I think that's by design. So it's really, understanding who in your community are invested and how are they invested in a given issue, and tailoring journalism and reporting and information provision around those things. So over the course of this project, this series, we want to help you and your newsroom consider why and how journalists are prioritizing audience information needs through community engagement and service-oriented reporting, and how to deepen relationships with your community to strengthen your accountability reporting and ensure that reporting has impact, remains sustainable, and is salient. And so just getting into a little bit more specifics of like what this could look like. When we conceptualized this project, we wanted to give folks kind of a little bit of a sense of what we've thought about at API when we think about this type of local accountability and government reporting. This list that we have on the screen is by no means exhaustive of what types of accountability and government reporting we think is centered and led by audiences, but it can give an idea of what we're looking for. So that can be identifying audience information needs and figuring out how to respond to those needs, helping audiences understand local government, how it works, and how they can interact with it, helping folks navigate interactions with public systems. And we've seen, this sort of grow in importance over the last year, but it's been important all along, and it's just kind of given the pandemic sort of the effect of some of these issues has risen in kind of the consciousness of newsrooms, I think, but other folks have been affected by these issues for much longer than just the past year. But we think about access and unemployment benefits, making vaccine appointments, or interacting with healthcare systems, understanding issues with utility bills or housing, helping folks address problems in their lives that are either because of an inability to access government services or an inability to access the information to address an issue that's in their lives. Other things that we think about are facilitating discussion and problem solving at kind of an ideation and information level within a community, and reporting out on work that's happening in your community by community members to address local issues. So again, this list is just some of the things that we've been kicking around. Our speakers will talk about some other ideas, and we hope that you all will bring your own ideas to this as well. Again, just quickly before we get into the presentations, we've conceptualized this project, this IdeastoAction series, in 3 phases. The first phase is what we're kicking off today, which is getting inspiration and ideas from models that have been successful across the country. In our second phase, which we'll share some links at the end of this call to help get started with that. We want to, for those interested newsrooms that are thinking about, how can we take this kind of audience driven approach in our newsroom for our local government and accountability reporting. We'll have a questionnaire, and we'll share this link at the end of the call, where you can develop a project idea. The American Press Institute and the speakers that we have will consider those ideas, offer feedback, suggestions, proposals. We'll do that in direct response to your proposal, as well as an event that we'll be hosting in mid-July, again with our speakers, where we can dive deeper into specifics, ask questions of these folks, and have some group discussion around that. And then finally, with those refined ideas, we want to open up the opportunity for folks to submit proposals for project funding from the American Press Institute, up to $10,000. So this is building on some of the work that we did last year around the election, kind of kickstarting ideas and experiments within your newsroom with small amounts of funding. This is obviously not enough money to totally redo and everything that you're doing in your newsroom, or really launch an expansive initiative. But we do want to give some kind of seed funding that you can help experiment with something, build a new capacity that you didn't have, and hopefully figure out how to sustain this work moving forward, which we also want to support. So that's the arc of the project that we want to undertake, and that we're beginning today. If you have questions about any aspect of this project, and I'm sure many of you might, we will have some time at the end of this conversation, and I can stay after for folks with any specific questions about sort of the mechanics of the proposals, ideas, submitting project descriptions, things like that. But with that, we will get into the heart of why I'm sure many of you are here today. And that is to hear from our list of speakers. So we have today Jimmy Gutierrez of Outlier Media, is the director of audience there. Nicolás Ríos, the audience editor at Documented, and then Megan Griffith-Greene, who is the senior editor for service features at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Megan pre-recorded her presentation last week, as she is this week on a much deserved vacation. But we will hear from Megan in person in our July event as well. So with that, just want to give an introduction to Jimmy and then turn it over to him for his presentation. So Jimmy Gutierrez is the director of audience for Outlier Media in Detroit, Michigan. Jimmy previously worked filling information gaps in low wealth neighborhoods in his home city of Milwaukee through News 414, a collaboration between nonprofit newsrooms to reach residents during the initial outbreak of COVID-19. Jimmy was recognized for his work as a 2020 John S. Knight Community Impact Fellow at Stanford University. And before that, he was a producer at New Hampshire Public Radio, where he contributed to multiple award-winning reporting projects. So with that, Jimmy, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, there is a lot that happened this past year, I think, for everyone. and just seeing some of the folks that are in the room, a lot of new people, a lot of people I know and I'm familiar with the work. And I think like this is, as we're going to kind of get through like Outlier's model, really essential to kind of like shift the paradigm of the dynamics of like journalism and who we're serving, what outreach looks like, what engagement looks like, how to be in relationship if we actually want to accurately report and like share information with communities, instead of kind of being distant and maybe missing the needs and reinforcing some of the old issues that are just inherent in like in race and racism and the power structure that exists within journalism as it is. And so like to get started, I just kind of wanted to intro Outlier Media and kind of like the work that's being done and has been being done for about like the last 5 years, I would say. And it was really started by Sarah Alvarez and her brainchild at the John S. Knight Fellowship at Stanford. And she was really inspired by Jay Hamilton's kind of model of like reaching vulnerable populations through SMS, addressing some of the tech divide that exists, and like how do you share information, right? Like how do you break down not just journalism for an elite audience, but how are you sharing information with people that truly need it, filling those information gaps. And so that's kind of how it all got started. And the idea behind it was, again, like to kind of like shift the power that's inherent within journalism to address those needs. And we know who those populations are just based on the relationships that already exist within journalism, the makeup of our newsrooms, the makeup of our editing staff, and those kind of things. And the idea behind Outlier was also kind of to place an emphasis on information, basic needs, some of the things that were talked about earlier, like how, throughout COVID, how to stay safe, masks, testings to vaccinations. What does that basic information look like? When it comes to housing, what does rental assistance look like? Utility assistance. When it comes to food, where are those free food sites? All of those things. So there's an emphasis on information over maybe more like traditional journalism, meeting those basic needs first, which we'll talk about going forward, which kind of leads into accountability reporting. But it starts foundationally with conversations and relationships and hearing directly from people on what those information needs are. And so kind of how the model works, again, as we talked about SMS and texting, but it's a regular push. I think we're pushing about 3 times a week to about 7,500 Detroiters. And we have a texting product, again, which I'll kind of show what that looks like. And again, a lot of those needs that we hear from Detroiters, whether it's transportation needs, housing, utilities, and we have a database, a static set with information that folks can kind of like text through, get that information. And if they have more additional follow-up questions, we have reporters standing by to answer those questions on a daily basis. And kind of one of the basis for another basis for this is that we know that local news in itself is dying. We do know, there's numbers to back this up. Like I think it's like 1 in 5 papers have closed over the past 15 years when it comes to local news. And we think that problem is actually much worse. So there is an essential need to kind of shift how we do this. How are we covering local vulnerable populations, communities of color, low wealth communities? And we'd like to be at the head of that. We can move on to the next slide. So this is kind of like, who is our audience? How do we engage with our audience? So I think the starting point is we ask that question, like, who are we serving? And I think that's a really important question, because when it comes to, I think like legacy print journalism, the legacy media, a lot of that kind of starts with that elite audience. Like, how do you sustain the business model? How are you creating, how are you sustaining a membership model? And we kind of wanted to invert that and start with kind of like, what is the general public's info needs? And so kind of like, how do we get that data, right? Like, how do we know who we're trying to serve? The first part is kind of has been developed and through iteration, which is kind of, again, like Sarah's brainchild as far as like this info needs survey. So texting out a mass swath of numbers, and this just happened both in New Jersey and more recently in Detroit, to ask people pretty much straightforward, like, what do you need more information on? Can we have follow-up conversations? What does this look like? So it's a lot of survey design. It's a lot of follow-up. Again, like when we are asking people for this kind of time, we also say, hey, if we're going to take up 30 minutes of your time, we also have a gift card. There should be some compensation applied to that, and we'll get into a little bit of like how we value people's time, especially when it comes to low wealth folks, communities of color, how our news sites have traditionally devalued that time, devalued those relationships. But within that, getting back to kind of that info needs survey, besides just the call out and hearing directly from people, what do people need? It's also info gathering, whether it's like 211 call info logs, reaching out to community groups and things like that. And through that process, we can say, okay, well, here's who we need to serve. Here are kind of those needs that people are already asking for, that they have articulated to us. And as you can kind of see here, that's like, we ID those resource needs, which then informs us to, okay, here are the information gaps. Here's where we're going to spend some of our time doing that reporting. And what that reporting looks like in our texting service is kind of really building out those resources that we know exist, so people can text through the process and the texting product really easily to get that product and get that information. And if you do want to try this out, which I would encourage folks to do if they are texting curious, is just to text Detroit to 73224, and kind of like scroll and play around and kind of see the information that we share. And like kind of just, this is a replicable model. This is a model that exists in multiple cities. This is a model that we brought to Milwaukee last year at the start of COVID. And through those interactions, you can kind of see like, yes, the information exists, but it also gives people the ability to talk directly with our reporters. And through those conversations, we kind of ID some of those accountability gaps, whether they are through direct conversations that we have with people, whether it's through trends that we see. I think one of the most glaring examples of that was last year. We saw, I think it was around April or May, just a flood of people having unemployment issues, which has translated more recently in the last couple months to transportation issues, which is really interesting. But as people are kind of like getting back into working spaces, I think that does make more sense. Another reason, when it comes to how do we engage and why do we engage this way, like why SMS, why texting, we know there's a tech divide. We know that also that phone numbers change, so it's not a perfect system. But what this allows us to do is kind of create relationships with people that may not have internet access, that may be going to social media for their news sites or for their news sources and things like that, and just kind of be that constant companion. We're working right now to which there are really great examples of people that do this. Shout out to like Resolve Philly, who kind of have their texting, they do a version of this too with the texting service, and they have them segmented out in a way that they can communicate on a regular basis. And so, it is a way to be accessible. It is a way to get right into people's hands. And I think a really good example of this is thinking about like this year's winter storms in Texas, and how like the Texas Tribune and Austin Statesman kind of came together to create this service for Texans who, were kind of in a very much a crisis situation, to provide like critical resource needs, fill those info gaps for people when tech was unavailable. We also provide it in English, Spanish, and Arabic, which are the three most common languages in Detroit. We can go to the next slide. So here's a little bit of kind of like what we see and kind of how we interact with folks. As you can see, kind of like some of our top questions, it's a lot of emphasis on housing and rent relief. And as far as debt and unemployment, the free food sites are something that we've seen a lot of people request as well. And those are kind of the 3 top needs throughout the pandemic. Before COVID, which was really a game changer for us, Outlier was doing tons of like our texting product was pretty much housing and utility focused. Mortgage foreclosure, rent assistance, tenant rights. That was really the main focus of the product. But you know, as COVID came in and now we're changing even more so now, we've had to kind of stay current and active. And you know, if you are providing a texting service, one of the things that is really important is to kind of stay current with and always changing, always iterating to reflect the needs. And so what that looks like for us is to redeploy those info needs surveys that we're talking about. And so we had just redeployed another one in Detroit I think it was a couple weeks ago. And that was again like the surprise takeaway there that I had kind of mentioned was just a lot of new people were asking for transportation and saying that was a major issue. And so this is just an example of the actual call out, like if you were to receive a text from us, kind of the language that we're using, you know, pretty straightforward. When I talk with our reporters as far as like how do we interact with people, you know, I want it to be really conversational. I want it to be personalized. I want people to feel like they're not interacting because, you know, we'll have people ask directly, like, is this a bot? Have some colorful language from people that don't want to hear from us. Yeah, like really personalize this, you know, like think about if you were interviewing someone, well, if you are relatable as a reporter or you have people that you look up to that are relatable as reporters, like you're really communicating with people. And if they do have, you know, issues, whether, you know, it is unemployment or they are looking for food or it is childcare, things like that, how are you interacting with them? How are you kind of creating some sort of, you know, environment to have them ask these follow-up questions to create a relationship? So I think it takes a different kind of hat than just maybe what we were taught or what a lot of people were indoctrinated into as far as what journalism looks like. We can move on to the next slide. So one of the questions we were asked, or I was asked coming into this, was like, how does audience engagement shape our, like, the accountability coverage? And so a lot of what we do, again, is like based off of our texting service and the follow-up conversations we have with residents. And, you know, again, a ton of what we heard this past year was unemployment. And something to know about Outlier is like it's a pretty small team built very much on collaborations. Shout out to Nina, and I saw Detour was here too. So people that really kind of like help us do the work because it is such a small team. And when it comes to accountability reporting, like that is not an inexpensive endeavor, you know, to do investigative work as well as like kind of like this daily service that we're providing. You know, it really takes a lot of muscle. And one of the things that Sarah really emphasizes is that you need to keep constant pressure on an issue. You know, you can't cover all the things. And I think that's just an ethos that comes with having a smaller newsroom. But also I think it's just good sound logic when it comes to reporting. If you want to see change, stay consistent, keep pressure on. And this is something that we have been reporting on in collaboration with the Detroit Free Press for almost the entirety of COVID, but the last 6 months definitely in depth as far as like Michiganders, Detroiters having a lot of issues with unemployment, and things are constantly changing, as everyone here knows. Another example of this was, and we'll get into another thing that Outlier does, is kind of run the Detroit Documenters program, which is an incredible opportunity to train up, you know, civically engaged residents to cover public meetings, create a public record, which does so much in this time of misinformation. But through that, we were able to gather information about like, okay, you know, we need to be covering the Open Meetings Act. You know, there are a lot of agencies that are either making what should be a more accessible time for people to get engaged locally that much more difficult. And you know, so through talking with the people that are covering these meetings, we were able to you know, to report and to draft some of our reporting, share some of our reporting in collaboration to kind of get that out there. Again, that was with the Free Press. So we can move on. Okay, this is when I was asked, like, how does Outlier define and measure success? Now, this is interesting because, like, I just like it because it's not status quo when it comes to this industry, and which I don't feel like is in any relationship with local communities, communities I know, you know, growing up, and so how I like to think about it, and how, like, I've really been taught to think about it when it comes to Outliers, like, is the information we're sharing valuable? Is it verifiable? And is it accessible, right? Like, if it hits those things and it's the information that we're sharing, then like what we're doing, the product that we're sharing out, it is a successful product. Again, since we are such a small team, we have to focus on those individual info gaps, right? And that can look like anything from, you know, we've had people ask for household goods, we've had people ask for childcare services, and so really meeting people's needs on a one-on-one basis, as well as serving those larger trends. That's another way that we measure success. And those are the things, and those are the relationships we build with residents that lead into that accountability reporting. And again, since we are a smaller team, that collaboration is really key. Right now we have a collaboration going on with Bridge Detroit, kind of looking at how the American Rescue Plan money is being spent. And so, you know, in conjunction and collaboration also with the Documenters program, we are sending documenters out to public meetings because the mayor is having this kind of listening tour as far as how should this money be spent. Bridge Detroit is going to go ahead and put together a report card, kind of seeing like if the way we spend this money reflects how residents were asking for it, and we're able to kind of collaborate, and we'll have our own report based on what we're finding as well. One more thing kind of to be said as far as like measuring success is that we know that local news is competing both with social media and national news. Those are services that aren't intended for local audiences. Those are services that can dilute the information when it comes to how folks are finding basic information, resources that are needed to improve quality of life. We know that local news also is being defunded, is disappearing. And so as far as we're still here, 5 years in, growing, we also see that as a measure of success. We see panels like this as a measure of success. And we hope to keep on building and kind of like really shifting how we all kind of look at, view, and are in relationship with local communities. Go on to the next slide. So I think like the last thing that I wanted to touch on as far as like when it comes to Outlier, when it comes to this model, when it comes to the work that we're doing, is that, you know, there's a lot of skepticism around calling what we do journalism. And I think that is just because there's more of a focus on value over modeling this like financial stability. You know, I've heard it kind of mentioned as being maybe less sophisticated. And, you know, that is a take from like an old guard, which is fair and fine by them. I think there's a lot of reasons why local journalism is in the shape that it's in, for being disconnected, for being elite, for being hyper white, for being very disconnected from any really true relationship when it comes to communities. And what Outlier has really tried to do is kind of like basically like have the community's voice as the foundation of the work that we do, have the community's needs, have residents' needs, both, the trends when it comes to, again, like housing, vaccines, unemployment, but then again, some of those one-offs or less frequent requests when it comes to childcare, or household goods and things like that. We're trying to build a foundation of a model that is both sustainable, but is also informed directly by residents, that is built by Detroiters and not editors. Candace, our CEO, Candace Fortman, brilliant human being, often calls what we do a terrible business model. I cannot argue with her. I just take notes, and this is something that we're also trying to change. I would encourage everyone in this room to try to change. Like, I think the seed money to think about how we do this is hyper important. How do we think about partnerships? How do we think about sustaining the work, is hyper important. One of the interesting things when I think about that and like this being a business model that's not sustainable and like how do we do this work is that people with less money also have less time to navigate these systems, and they have higher stakes when it comes to the day-to-day, and if they can't find the resources to get to work, to stay in their homes, whatever the case may be. So the fact that this isn't a good business model kind of lets you know, and we all know this, like who is valued here, who is valued in the work that we're doing. So figuring out how to create a sustainable business model within the work that we're doing is top of list. The other thing I also wanted to mention here, and I saw Max in the room, is just kind of a shout out to the Documenters program, which started in City Bureau, and is in multiple locations, Akron, Cleveland, Detroit as well. And kind of taking over that program has allowed us to do a lot of really important work, both within our collaborations, within our accountability reporting, but then as also when it comes to creating public record. And I kind of mentioned this at the top, but growing that public record really does a crucial job in countering like misinformation, as well as making local government more accessible, which, I don't know who else saw it, but, or who else was going through either a budget year or an election year last year, or also this year, to be able to see a public so engaged post the 2016 election, post, how are you appropriating city budgets with regards to the police budget, was a conversation, and is still a conversation, will hopefully be a conversation going forward. Those are all things that this program serves to do. And also kind of like making public records sexy. Like, how do you engage people so that they want to kind of be a part of this process, so they have ownership over the information that's being shared? And this is I think this is very much in the ethos of Outlier, where we're taking and we're starting with the needs of people that we're hearing from when it comes to just like resource information and filling those info gaps. Now we're working with people who have, who are civically engaged and want to be more civically engaged, and we're following their curiosities. And one of the things we're doing, and we have done, is formalize a newsletter to kind of like share the information that's curated by them for them. But we'll be making that available to a wider audience as well. And I think that's another way just to kind of create some sort of equity when it comes to the information that we're sharing. I just wanted to say, like, if you have any questions, if you have any advice on how we could be doing this better, I love to hear from folks. I think there are a lot of brilliant people in this room. I think there are a lot of brilliant people doing this kind of work. And, from, the people that we'll hear from later today in this work, and we've got IRE going on. I think that hopefully we can all kind of create some sort of dialogue across each other across organizations, that we can learn from each other. Because again, like, this shouldn't be a terrible business model. This should be something that we're able to sustain for, you know, urban spaces, rural spaces, and everywhere in between.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for that background on Outlier. For folks that have questions for Jimmy, we may have some time at the end of this conversation. Feel free to drop those questions in the chat. If we can't get to them today, we can get to them in our follow-up, as well as in our event in July. But with that, I also now want to give the floor to Nicolás Ríos. Nicolás Ríos is the audience editor of Documented in New York City. He is an Emmy-nominated multilingual Chilean journalist. Nicolás oversees Documented's efforts to engage immigrant communities, to produce community-guided content, building trusting relationships to uncover and address misinformation and meet community information needs. He's previously worked as a reporter and a documentary fixer for Vice Media, as an international news reporter, senior editor, and broadcaster for CINA in Chile, and as a freelance reporter for BBC World Service, El Mercurio, and the Daily Trust in Nigeria. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Nicolás. Thank you so much.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you for attending this this meeting with so many interesting people. To say and to add to this very thorough presentation by Jimmy is that we have a very similar model. In fact, when we were creating our WhatsApp service, I'm going to go into that a little bit later, we even met Sarah Alvarez. I understand that thanks to a fellowship by API. So thank you, Outlier. Thank you, American Press Institute. We have a model that is really similar to what Outlier does in SMS. The only thing is that we adapted to WhatsApp, mainly because we try to understand. I mean, we did first before launching, we created a methodology to try to understand pain points from the audience, to try to understand what people need in terms of media coverage, to try to understand what they are interested about in their everyday lives, and to try to understand how they consume news. After this, without even thinking about a media product, right? We weren't thinking about a WhatsApp distribution channel or community or anything. Only after understanding the pain points that I would say was our step one, understanding pain points. Then we went to step two, which was modeling a solution for the pain points that we encountered, that we found. And that is when we understood our research and said, okay, like 99% of the people that we interviewed say that they consume WhatsApp as a primary method of communication with their peers. So we need to meet audiences where they are, instead of us creating a product that we thought was useful, but people weren't necessarily in that platform. And by this, I mean, Documented, before WhatsApp community that we founded, Documented was a newsletter first company. If we were to do a new product without having done this audience first methodology, right? We would have launched a newsletter in Spanish for immigrants of New York, for Latino immigrants, undocumented immigrants of New York. But then after the research, we understood that people were not really using WhatsApp, not even for communicating, but also for gathering news. WhatsApp was the #1 app in our research, but also it's data in reports out there in the internet. It's the number, even like in the Reuters news report of that year in 2018. WhatsApp was the #1 app for reading news in the Latino countries. So it was both data analysis that backed up our our idea of creating a product on WhatsApp to, again, meet the audiences where they are. And then we tested. We tested for a year, actually, mainly because of funding. We didn't have the money to put actually funds into this experiment. And then the pandemic happened, and we made sure to use the knowledge that we had and that we gathered in our test into this final iteration of what the WhatsApp community is now. So again, basically, it's putting audiences first, that we were able to create a community. We have now a community of more than 1,500 members on WhatsApp. We do get, we have been even researching within the community. We now know, for example, that 68% of those who responded this very big research that we did are or consider themselves undocumented. We didn't ask for their immigration status. We asked for what they consider themselves or what they think of. And basically, to finish this presentation, we created a community on WhatsApp that is now integrated in our news gathering and in our reporting. So putting audience first to create a product doesn't just end our relationship with our audience, but it creates a never-ending relationship and like a circular model that I presented with IPI a couple of weeks ago. Instead of like doing a top-down model of us creating a newsletter and telling people what they should be interested in and what they should be reading, what we have now is a circular model. And I imagine that you guys also get a lot of feedback from your users, and you read it and you take that into account when reporting, as you showed in your presentation. So, for example, yesterday we ended up publishing a story that we partnered with Univision here in New York, a story that came from our WhatsApp community. They were alerting us that they couldn't apply for public funds of New York State because in order to apply, you need a passport, a valid passport. And the consulates of 3 Latino countries are not renewing passports because the backlogs are so long. So not only did they have to wait, the immigrants, undocumented immigrants of New York, for a year, for 15 months for help, but when help is now available, they cannot apply because of their countries, right? That was only, there was no way that we could have known about that because we are not undocumented. I'm Latino, yes, I am, but I have a job, I have a visa, I have education. So it was really difficult for me to have being faced with that reality, and it was our audience that alerted us about it. We created an investigation or even a research about it, and then we publish our findings. This is how our circular model works. Some news that we have to share now is that we are trying to expand this same model that we're doing with Latino undocumented immigrants on WhatsApp. We're researching on 2 other communities. We're researching on Black Caribbeans of New York and Chinese-speaking Chinese immigrants. I'm making this clarification because we're not researching on Chinese Americans, as they speak English and they could already be served by English-speaking media. So we're researching on 2 new communities of New York. We don't really know yet if there is room for us. We don't really know yet if there is room, what it would be shaped like, because we still need to understand the pain points of our audience. But if we find space for us in there, if we find, and if there is a space, and if we find that there is a way for us to put audiences first and meet them where they are, then Document could be expanding to a new community in 2022. We're doing the research for now. Hopefully we will be able to expand. But again, if in the top-down linear model of traditional journalism, we could have just opened a WeChat service for Chinese immigrants, right? But we don't really know if people, what the pain points are of people in in WeChat. Too long didn't read. People have a lot of mistrust issues with it. That's what we're finding. So do we still go there and try to find misinformation, or do we meet them elsewhere? That's something that we're researching for now. And with those findings, we will make decisions. And even after we make the decision and we launch a product, that's a big if, because we still don't know the results, then we will still try to accommodate audiences into the reporting process. Because only by doing that, you create information that makes sense to your communities. And when journalism makes sense, you create trust, and it's a virtuous circle. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nicolás. Really appreciate that insight into the research approach y'all take. With our last speaker, again, I mentioned that Megan couldn't be here with us in person today, but we have her presentation recorded, and I will start that in just a second. But just as a heads up for folks, Megan's presentation is right at 14 minutes, which puts us just 1 minute past the hour. If you do end up having to leave early, just wanted to let you all know again that we will have this session recorded and sent and posted online, and we will send that out to everybody as well early next week. But with that, I will introduce Megan's presentation. So Megan, again, is the senior editor for service features at the Philadelphia Inquirer, where she manages a team of reporters that answer reader questions, help people understand the news and apply it to their lives, and locate resources to better live in and connect to the Philadelphia region. Originally from Toronto, Megan previously worked in audience engagement, newsletters, and investigative journalism at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. So with that, I will start her presentation in just 1 second.
Senior service editor that runs the service journalism team at the Philadelphia Inquirer. And today I just want to take you through some of the lessons that we've learned as a desk, working over the past year and a half, and particularly over the past year through COVID and the election. So hold on. Here we go. First of all, I just want to start off with just some basics in case people are a bit fuzzy. What am I talking about when I'm talking about service journalism? I tend to have a very expansive view of what constitutes service. And broadly speaking, it's just any story that helps readers solve a problem. So our mission as a desk is that we work to help people by providing practical and accessible information so that people can better engage with the city and region. I just want to point out that word accessible for a second, because there's kind of a lot to that piece. When I talk about accessible work, it's not only with the recognition that there's a large population of people in Philadelphia and in our region for whom English is not the first language. We are also a city that has a low-ish literacy rate. It's also just respecting the fact that this is a stressful and hard time. People are busy and distracted and all kinds of things. And so, part of what we do as a team is not just focus on the stories that we want to tell, but also how we can make that easier for our readers to understand and use and absorb, how we can quiet down that experience and make it a little bit easier and more reader friendly. I also want to just point out that service journalism has traditionally focused on lifestyle. And we certainly do that as on our team. We cover a lot of food, and we cover a lot of local travel, that kind of stuff. But there is a really important role for this kind of work to play in both government and accountability reporting, which seems pertinent to the discussion today. So just a little bit of history of service at the Inquirer. The desk has existed in some form for about 3.5 years. I've been running it for about 1.5 years. The reason why we wanted to launch a service desk was just because there was a recognition that, when we talk about creating value for our readers, this is a really obvious place to do that. Also, just a recognition that this is not something that newspapers have always done or done well. This is tends to be a type of storytelling that's more specific to magazines, which is where I started in journalism, so maybe why I'm so comfortable in it. But even though it's not traditional to newspapers, we do have like a really unique expertise that we can use to deliver this really well. I like to talk about how newspapers and news in general, we're good at pointing out problems. We're less great at helping people solve them. So, a lot of what we do on the desk is kind of flip that model. So we're not sort of standing at the front of the class as the teacher trying to tell you what's important and what you need to know. We're really focused on like identifying what the information needs are of our readers, what they're telling us they need, and we're the access point to that information. A little bit about what we cover. So alongside my expansive definition of service journalism, I also have a fairly expansive mandate beyond that sort of traditional service topics. And the one that I'll just point out here is civics. Civics is one of the really important pillars of the work that we do. That covers everything from like how to get stuff done, like how the rules and the systems of the city work. We did a big tenants' rights guide. We did a really big voter guide with a really wonderful and helpful grant from API that helped us do that. And we cover a really wide range of topics. They really focus on like how we live our daily lives and access services in the city. So it's everything from garbage and recycling to marijuana laws to anything where you're trying to sort of get stuff done or understand how the rules work and how they apply to you. And then just as a desk, we have a 2-track team. One of our tracks is that we cover news adjacent work. So that's anything that is a service component to something in the daily news that connects that news story with our readers' daily lives. And then the other track is really this push that we're making to build evergreen resources that people will be able to use and access and find that will be relevant over time. A little bit about our team. So our structure, we have a core team of 5. There's myself, I have a deputy editor. We have 2 reporters and a columnist on the core team. We also collaborate with desks across the newsroom, and that's partly to identify service opportunities for either those desks to write, for us to help produce, or for us to take on with their cooperation. Just a couple of those collaborations real quick. The politics team, they've done some pieces for us, including like why does Pennsylvania elect judges? What does the district attorney actually control? These like really good primers and explainers that help kind of bring people a little bit further up the ladder so that they can engage with some of the daily politics coverage a little more easily. Collaboration with the business desk. What can you get from the new stimulus bill? We broke that down to like, if you have kids, if you are retired, if a number of other very specific groups that would have that could get extra money from the stimulus bill, and how to use the new unemployment system is another example. And then our health team, we've done obviously quite a lot of health service over the last year, but we've done collaborations such as like how to get to the mass vaccination sites by bus, by car, walking, what the parking is like, how new mask rules work. We've done a lot of COVID explainers and service pieces this past year. A little bit about how service shaped our coverage last year. So obviously most of our resources went into the 2 big stories of COVID and also the election. Our approach was that we focused on simple, clear, and calm answers to common questions. Both of those events were incredibly overwhelming and stressful and emotional. And what we really tried to do was not just deliver the information, but also like make people feel a little more confident and comfortable and grounded in these stories. Trying to calm down the general panic that existed, and really doing that with like the way we delivered our storytelling. And then, so with COVID, what we ended up doing was a lot of questions as standalone stories. So we would treat a question very specifically and just deal with one question at a time, just like try to calm it down. That was really to help like ease that reader fatigue and stress. And also the other reason we did them as standalone stories is all those stories were very easy to find on search. People were looking for a specific answer. They were much more likely to find one of our stories. For the election, we took a different approach, which is we did a comprehensive guide in 5 languages. So everything was all in one place. You just had to come to one place, and we kept all that information updated. I'm going to show you those things real quick. Ignore the hideous number of tabs I have open. So this is our how to vote guide. And we just broke it down. We made it so easy for people to find the information that they needed and jump right to that question. And we publish it in 5 different languages. Okay, back to this. I don't know how to go back into full mode. Okay, 1 second. Oops. Sorry. Here we go. Okay. I just want to point out that audience listening was really critical for both of these projects, which I'm going to talk about now. So connecting with audiences and community listening is a core of our service work. Listening doesn't just tell you what to write; it tells you where your readers are on a topic. That was really important. I'll give you an example for a lot of our COVID service. We were getting. We were a couple months in. We've, of course, been following every story, every headline for months. We were getting in questions from our readers that was like, is it safe for me to open my window? And that's just a moment to like sit back and think, oh, yes, like people are not where you are. And you have to like remember that. And that's a really important reminder to a newsroom that's used to covering like every single detail. Some quick strategies and articles to help like get that reader feedback. We're a Harkin partner, so we have a Curious Philly embed, which you use to source a lot of reader questions. You can do the same thing or something similar with a Google form where you're actively asking for what people want to know, or prominent CTA prompts that go to an email. There's lots of ways to do it. Some strategies in the world, I would say partner with community organizations to source questions that people are coming to them with. And you'll get a real sense of what some of those critical information gaps look like. And good SEO is really important too. Like, doing some research about what people are looking for, I think can be a really helpful strategy. The bottom line is this, like, don't just write what you think people need to know. Like, you have to have some capacity for people to tell you what they need. I think I'm running way over. Andrew, am I running really, really long?
No, you're good.
Okay. A little bit about story format, how we cover our stories. So I guess, again, like we're really focused on simplicity and clarity, calmness to our work. I really like to let the material dictate the format. So, we're really approaching it from where we think our readers are and what they're going to need to know and in what order. I think that that's a really important thing. Big thing with me, burn down conventions that don't serve you. We tend to have a different style for a lot of our writing than I think you would find in most of the rest of the paper. We address the reader directly as you very often, as opposed to like speaking in the third person. Signposting is really key. So break up the story with bold, with subheads, with anything visually you can to like help people understand what's there, help them scan and find what they need. Set expectations about what they can get from this article is all really, really important. And the benefit is like, it'll actually make the information easier to remember too. Be as simple, clear, and conversational as possible, I think is a virtue with this kind of work. And then this is my last slide. Just a couple tips for starting a service desk or increasing your capacity for writing service in your newsroom. It's important to reinforce the importance of service journalism from the top. There's a lot of newsroom stigma in some, especially legacy media, where service is not considered as important as regular journalism. And I think that is very important to change the culture around. Find service angles that complement existing efforts. You know, most of your reporters will have this service information. They're just telling it to people at their dinner table when people ask them questions. So, you know, the information is there. It's just like finding that good second story complement to the existing reporting they're already doing. You know, just to reiterate this again, ask readers what they need to know. Very important to have some listening capacity here too. Try out new formats and story types. Maybe it doesn't have to be stories. Maybe you start a text line. Maybe these are graphics. Maybe this is a social campaign. You can kind of try different things to see and see what resonates with your audience. And then reach out to other newsrooms doing similar work. There's a lot of us out there. It's a growing number. And I'm certainly happy to talk to anyone at any time to help advise on service efforts. And this is my email. Thank you so much for having me. And sorry I can't be there in person. And enjoy the rest of the day.
All right. So with that, that wraps up the sort of speaking portions of our conversation today. Really want to send a big thanks to Jimmy, Nicolás, and Megan for sharing their knowledge and for agreeing to continue to do so over the course of this project, particularly around specific questions that y'all have around reporting efforts that you're exploring in our July event. But with that, I know folks.
Something?
Yeah, go ahead, Nicolás.
In line with that last presentation, amazing presentation, we have done something like that thanks to our WhatsApp community. Basically, after getting so many questions, specifically at the beginning of the pandemic, we then created articles to answer those questions, and then we created like a one-stop shop to get all the articles that we had. Collectively, all the articles that we have made answering people's questions in many subjects, but around the pandemic, are now like 60% of Documented's monthly audience, like visitors. So it is good for your business to actually be putting your audiences and responding to the people, to what they care about. It's good for your business, good for your analytics, good for trust.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicolás. So with that, appreciate y'all for staying on a few minutes after the hour. The next phase in this process is, as Kevin put a link to in the chat, thinking about project ideas that y'all have, and then we'll offer insight, feedback, other resources on those ideas before that kind of final grant proposal process or funding proposal process. But if, I know we went through it kind of quick today. If anybody has questions about the specific API process and the project submission work, I will stay on as long as folks have questions, but want to give the opportunity for our speakers to sign off and just give them a big thank you again today for their content, for the presentations, for their expertise. Thank you all so much. If you do want to stay on and ask a question about our process, I've given folks the ability to unmute and on video, or put your video on if you'd like, as well.
So I'll jump in from Your Voice, Ohio. Is it possible for a news collaborative representing multiple newsrooms to apply for the grant?
I think yes. You'd have to think about how is this collaborative, particularly if it's statewide, serving a local audience. How are they're also relatively small grants and small funding, so just being clear about what impact that funding has and on a specific audience or a specific community. So the tighter that you can be in terms of identifying this is the community, this is the audience that we want to serve, and being clear about how funding will support that, then yes, that would be all right. Noreen, do you have a question?
Andrew?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, hi. My name is Noreen. I'm with Vox Populi. I'm in Winter Garden, Florida. Our area is about to embark on a revitalization of a historic Black community. And we had already planned to do a journalism project to document that restoration because the community is deeply distrustful of the government, and the city government is planning to keep the residents in the community. So we're planning to document it because it is a historic Black community. So that was going to be my project pitch. How much detail do you want in the initial proposal for July?
Well, so in the initial kind of project description that we'd offer feedback on, really not a lot of detail. I mean, if you have more detail, that's okay, but it really, we're looking at rough ideas of saying, here's what we're thinking about doing. Here's what we know about this audience. Here's what we're hoping to accomplish with this, and why we're in a position to serve this audience that we've identified. So for that, what we say on the questionnaire, try and keep these open-ended sentences, or open-ended answers to 3 sentences or less. Obviously, in some cases, you might not be able to do that, and that's all right. But really, just an informal look at, like, here's broadly what we're trying to accomplish, because we know folks are in different places with these ideas. The proposal will be a little bit more detailed, but also we don't want it to be a burden on folks, because we understand what that funding proposal process can look like from the other side. So we do want to make it easy for folks to participate. I think we for this project description sketch, if you're spending more than 45 minutes on it, you're probably spending too much time on it from our view. I really just want to get a sense and a broad sketch of what folks are thinking.
So there's a questionnaire, I'm sorry, there's a questionnaire attached to that link that you put in the chat?
Yeah, there's a form embedded on that site. Yep. You can just complete that form.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for joining.
So I had a question about the application, I guess, for the proposal. Would you be looking for something more like a specific project, or kind of looking to just for an initiative in general? Because I like text message newsletters, and like just connecting with people through text messaging is something I've been interested in exploring. And I do have specific project ideas, but I was just wondering if just trying to look at text messaging like as a tool would work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the way I'd think about it is, and maybe this is our language that needs a little bit of refining around project, but something where you're using a new tool to reach an audience, that's a project in our view. And so in that sense, yes, that would be acceptable. I think for us, really, the point is, how are you reaching and serving and supporting an audience through whatever it is the work that you're doing, whether that's texting, whether that's an investigative reporting effort, whether that's community conversations, the ideas that we heard from folks on this call today as well. We want to be expansive about that, and really, for us, the core thing here is, how are you serving and supporting this audience that you've identified?
All right, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions or thoughts before we wrap up for the afternoon? All right, then I think we can cut it short there. Well, cut it short 11 minutes past the hour. I will once again drop my email in the chat in case anybody has other questions, and it is also available on our website. But otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us today, for those of you that are still here, and have a good rest of your afternoon. Thanks so much. Bye.